All right. So first off, we're working on polaris-card-news here, right? So it's a specific type of card. It's specifically for news. You see it over here. That's what we're trying to replicate. So it's not a chip. Okay, so Polaris chip. It is Polaris card news. So we have to go bulk replace. All right, and we got Polaris chip. So anywhere that's referenced, it's gotta be Polaris card news. And then lastly, these files need rename. Polaris card news. Polaris card news. Okay. So let's focus on this for a bit. Now that we've got that working. We've got date chip as its own element. That's great. We don't need multiple implementations of host. A.chip is good. Opacity, hover, this stuff looks good. Make sure that we got this stuff spaced appropriately. Generally, I put all the media queries at the bottom because everything still does cascade, even in here. All right, so let's move those over. We've got an H3. We've got some super specific font sizes. It's kind of weird. I mean, we're copying a design here, but I would just make this image and not image SRC. There's no reason to make that image SRC. Good job on having alt information there. That's important. It could honestly just be nothing though, because it's kind of decorative with the way this is used. So I'd probably make it nothing, which implies that it's for decoration only. I would not make these open to a new target by default. That could be something you add in via a property, kind of like this, but I wouldn't do it that way. It's decent enough to have these values here. We've got date, which is cool. We got to watch on these slots, though. We cannot have 3 slots like this. Now, we could have slot name equals header. We could have slot name equals name. Now, this isn't a chip, so that's already weird. The date chip is the link. I'm going to say that's like the title, to be perfectly honest. It's not a chip. Title. All right, so then we got that title, or we got chip somewhere down here, right? Yeah. So, right, we got the title in there, which is the name of this. I would probably, while we're there, also make this title. It's not the name of the card, it's the title. And then if we look at this with the header, I don't know what that does, to be totally honest. It says date, chip, and heading. Let's right click and inspect. So we've got a slot there. We've got a link on that, and then we've got image container. Image container has a slot in it with like a name or something. So that doesn't make any sense. Right, so we can consolidate this a little bit right there. So we've got name or title, right? We don't need header. Now we can still name this slot header if we really wanted to. The reason we need that slot to be something named all is we already have description down here in a generic slot. And so the generic slot is what's going to fill up our information in the description, which I'll show in a minute here. So title, link, image, description is fine, date, that's good. I actually like that. You could also implement this way so that the header is the thing that's getting clicked on with the link. That's going to break it in the short term here until I fix the API for this. So I got to go over to index. This is going to be image because we're modifying the API. Okay. Link. Okay. It's not going to be header. It's going to be title. Description. I'm going to show you in a second here. And we're going to take this. We probably wouldn't write all this in here. It kind of looks ridiculous. We could, but more likely it's going to be something like this. And now I'm only spacing this because there's a lot of attributes here, so we can see what the heck's going on. But it's more likely you'd have something like this, right? Because you'd have potentially Penn State Human Resources in here. Maybe that has like a strong tag or something on it, right? For emphasizing what that is. So let's look at that first card, right? Even to do something like that with strong, that requires us to use a slot instead of a property because property won't allow HTML to go into it. So, all right, we've got image on there. Let's go and fix these other ones. Link. Header is going to be title. We'll allow a description on those. That's fine. Date. Okay. So that should be enough for those implementations, right? And then where's our image? Go in here, image. It's still image src, so we make that image. I don't think active is used here. I'm not sure what you're thinking of with that. And then link name, that has to be title. And then we get rid of header. Here we go. All right, so now we've got that on there. We can focus on that whole box, right? We've still got our hover over that. It does that little weird clipping thing. I don't really understand what that's about, but right, those flow next to each other. It's looking half decent already. We go and clean up some of the CSS. Not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of specificity in this. I'd recommend watching the CTA as far as the CSS variables used in order to achieve that. There's a lot more complexity in that aspect of that design. Then we got title, link, image, description, date. I end up moving this up top, right? So that we know what our defaults are, and then I try to put them in the same order. These are all typed correctly. Our CSS in there. This is halfway decent looking styling here. Let's make sure that our H3, right, we've got that applied. We don't have any, no. Okay, that opacity part's working. We have a class equals title. I'm gonna say image link. And then wherever I have dot title, I can refactor that because that got kind of modified here. All right, so you also don't need the A on these. I mean, you can, but all right, I don't need this. Dude, that's like a double level of specificity, and it's not really needed. All right, so we still get the same effect. And then, so we got on the card. It's a self-closing tag. Probably should have that, but it's not the end of the world. This one's pretty decently built. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm only doing some minor cleanup here. I would, and I'm not going to go through and redo every single one of these. Everything that's pixel-based, I probably have CSS variables involved. These are decent names on classes and things like that. It does get a little weird with these sorts of design comps, only in that there's like a specific side, right? And this works decently well on mobile or not already. And so generally you don't see things like this in most design assets we're going to make, where you have like a hard coded, like, hey, this is 450 pixels wide. At the same time, with cards, you kind of do. Like cards generally are not squishy in the same way as some elements would be. So pretty decent implementation here. Some minor cleanup from this one. I did want to go into date chip real quickly. There's some good work on date chip. And I discussed in class the notion of variabilizing some of the colors and things like that. Also having default values, I would tend to stay away from. And then here, right, calculating what these are. You could sort of do that, but I don't think you need to do it that way. Right, what we should be doing is month should be updated whenever date changes. And so the way to do that would be updated, changed, properties, and then this would be changed properties dot has, and if we has a date as one of the changed properties. Okay, so if we have date gets changed, then we can rerun these. So this is enough to say, calculate those things based on the other one changing. Now, in the end, you know, as you see here, you should get the same effect, right? Like if I go and update this, we're getting the exact same output. if I remove these, it should go away. Yes, right? So where this is important is any time date is changed, you will see that change reflected. Now, over here, this should be null. Let's set month to null, and let's set date initially to null. And that way we know that these values are being updated based on propagating. Why this is important to do it in this way versus like in render is render, that would work on the very first time. But now if I update the date to 11/25 or 11, let's do 11/10/2022. See, it's updating in real time. And that happens only because of this updated life cycle. So by including this in updated, this says this is responding to any change of this value. So again, pretty minor state management sort of a change needed here to hit a decent level of perfection with that. Again, date is numeric, not super important, but helpful. It's good that it has initial host values. These are well styled. I probably wouldn't hash this out in this way. It'd probably be like padding and then just composite all the values together. These are minor convention sort of changes. Another thing, and this is something I personally like to do, I do date chip and then, date chip.tag. So this is the class, right? And this is the class and then a attribute or property on there. So what I'm doing is I do static get tag return and then date chip. And this is purely convention driven. Like there's nothing saying you have to do that, obviously, because it was working a second ago. But then it's just a little easier as you're working with lots of elements to go through and modify that at scale. But pretty decent workout.